is created. It's not.
That's a giant war chest of brainwashing and payoffs.
It really is. And, you have to understand that, this is what they do. This is not mystical. It's not magical. It's not something that, our government wouldn't do it. Again, go to Fort Bragg. Right there, what do you have? You have the 4th Special Psychological Operations Battalion. Okay, it's right in your face. On their crest, their motto is verbum vincet, which is Latin for the word conquers.
Absolutely, and they say the main battlefield is the human mind.
It really is. And again, I know you talk about, I've heard your show in the past, and you've brought up what the founders did, what Samuel Adams and his crew did in Boston in, late 1750s all the way up into the 1770s. And what they did was they wrote in newspapers. They put out pamphlets. Newspapers then were basically just one piece, a one-piece document.
It's a broadsheet.
But they wrote constantly, usually under different pen names, although everyone knew who they were. They had meetings with different groups constantly. When things happened, they controlled the press or around those events.
Well, let's be clear. There were more Tory pro-empire papers, but people learned that was a bunch of bull. They wanted
there were more Tories. Another thing people misunderstand about the colonial days, the pre-revolutionary days, is there were no Americans in the colonies. They were only British subjects. Most of them, their greatest desire was to become wealthy and return to England, not to stay and build a new country. That really wasn't for most people. It was not their objective. So the Patriots were fighting an uphill battle. The Tories were, the majority of the population, particularly when the wind would blow that way. More of the population would go that way. Later, as the Patriots looked like they had an opportunity to win, they had more converts, of course.
Beautifully said, and they were committed, and they weren't going to back down, and the arrogance of the establishment is what in the end brought them down. The British had never been defeated up until that time. The globalists, I see them in a weaker position than the British were here in the colonies, because the people were British. Over 80% were Tory.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the real unknown story of that time period. This was a revolt of British citizens against the British king. This was not Americans fighting. This was not a foreign war. This was an internal battle. This was an internal revolution. So we're in a much better position now than those folks were.
Well, I've studied Greek revolutions, Roman revolutions, countless others. There's very few that are legitimate. Our revolution was, not perfect, but was the greatest example ever, because they wanted to make George Washington king. He said no, and after 2 terms, he said, I'm going back to my farm to grow hemp and tobacco, and he left. These really were amazing people. I mean, I think I'm
He set the stage for that. I mean, there was a time, and I can't recall the story perfectly. If someone wants to read a great book, I would recommend. I might slip my mind. I'll think of it in a moment. But there was a time when in General Washington's soldiers, when his officers wanted to revolt, they wanted to take over the government. And he had a speech, talk with them in a small, I can't remember if it was a schoolroom or a church. Usually they were, both used for the same purposes. And a very sensitive, personal speech. And after the speech, they had changed their mind. If it wasn't for George Washington, we would probably have ended up with, another king immediately after the Revolution.
Absolutely. It's just that's why they love to demonize the Founding Fathers. I mean, to have this group of historians come out and say Abraham Lincoln was a much greater person than George Washington, as they've been announcing on the news the last 2 days, that is, just for anyone who knows history, so insulting to your intelligence.
Well, most people aren't going to study history. It takes a lot of work. The Men Who Started the American Revolution, that's the name of the book, by A.J. Langeth. The Men Who Started the American Revolution. Great book. It's a history from, it starts around 1757 and takes you into the formation of the winning of the revolution. It's a great book. Everything the Founding Fathers did was heavily documented. They wrote in papers. They wrote letters to each other. People wrote about them. We know virtually everything about them, but yet very little of that information bubbles up into pop culture. You know, one of the things that always strikes me as odd is if you mention Samuel Adams to some people, the first thing they'll associate it with is beer, when in reality he never brewed any beer. You know, his father was a maltster. He made malt. He sold it to people who brewed beer. Samuel inherited that money upon his father's death. Not caring about money, he was a bad money manager. He loaned half the money to a friend, never to be seen again, and then he mismanaged and spent the other half. His time was spent fermenting revolution. That's what he was passionate about. His job, matter of fact, he was the British tax collector for Boston. He didn't make beer.
Absolutely. I want to go to some phone calls. They'll be all over the map. But going back to people you talk to and engaging what's going on in the military, I mean, they can see outside the compartmentalization. Now it's announced, meaning, you know, when they start announcing they're getting ready for physical martial law, that means they're considering engaging it. You know, they wouldn't uncloak their operation if they weren't. Can you speak to that?
Well, not really to specifics. You know, I don't know what's in their mind. I can't, you know, I'm not privy to the inside plans. I'm just seeing it form from the outside, you know, doing the analysis, putting the pieces together. I can tell you that all levels, from young enlisted personnel to senior NCOs to officers, know something is wrong. Even if they're not familiar with all the information, they know when they're in Iraq, you know, guarding a cement factory that doesn't make cement, that something's wrong. So it's they all know something's wrong. Where that's going to lead to, I know that's the answer you're looking for. I don't know. I think what's important is that we're aware of what's happening and that we try to influence where things are going to go to. And I think people need to really get out there, and while we have the opportunities, push the information out there. If you're a municipal official and you're involved in these meetings, start sharing the information, make YouTube videos, get in touch with different websites.
That's right. We need to be in the fight, and people want some tailored, exact blueprint. Folks, use your own mind. Targets of opportunity in the info war. Don't sit on the fence, folks. That's where you're going to get run over. You need to be in the fight. Get in the fight. Continue with how we get in the fight.
Well, I think the way we do that is first is you get out and you support people who are already doing it. If you can, you know, buy the movies. I've actually just recently found some of your movies on Google. I wasn't aware that you've done so many documentaries. So some real interesting stuff. I don't want. It's a side subject, but something really interesting happened while I was watching one of your movies the other night. Get active, get out and get involved on the street level. I mean, just do something. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have any special knowledge or experience if you have desire, because you'll learn everything that you need to do. So please get out there. You can support us at the Daily Newscaster. This is a money-losing venture. We do this because we want to get the information out. You know, I've been reading and studying open source information, doing some analysis, trying to come up with an idea of the direction it's going. You know, I don't have the inside answer. I don't know if anyone does, but you can get an idea of how events are materializing.
No, I agree,
and
forecasting that. But you piqued my interest. What happened when you were watching one of the films?
Well, I found a film, and I apologize if I can't remember everything, because I didn't get to watch the whole film. I believe it was called Exposing Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove.
Dark Secrets, yes. Well, I was at the segment where they're having the ceremony called the Cremation of Care, very elaborate ceremony, in the redwood forest, the beautiful redwood forest. And my relative was here who has a 5-year theological degree, has a master's in divinity, where he's basically a religious historian. He studied religions and really knows them from a historical perspective. Well, he came by for a brief moment. He didn't have a lot of time. I was watching your video on my monitor, And I showed him about 40 seconds of that elaborate ceremony. He did not know where the video came from. He didn't know the context.